3-2 Meridian and
the Meridian. If there's still active shooting, we'll take the Bearcat, head that way.
39.
Upper Sioux, it's going to be Locust Grove and U-Stick, and they just put out a shot flyer, just so you know, on the route.
This is the 1032 podcast, where we interview experts in firearms and training with law enforcement, military, and competitive shooting backgrounds. All right, Yong, it's good to have you back on here, the 1032 podcast. We had you on here before, and what we're going to talk about mainly tonight is the 2025 Law Enforcement Firearms Conference that we have coming up on May 28th, 29th at the Double Tap Range in Boise, Idaho. And you, along with some other high-profile instructors, are going to be there, and you're going to be your specialty is handgun, correct?
That's correct.
So tell us what your background is. Basically, you were a SWAT cop out of Washington for a while. You're retired now, but you're also a USPSA nationally ranked shooter, 5-time Grandmaster in pistol, correct?
That's correct. I spent about 3 years in Texas working as a patrolman, and then transferred to Bellevue, Washington, and spent almost 28 years there. And spent about 11 years in the SWAT team, but I was involved in many other things besides SWAT, defensive tactics, use of force instructor, but focus was primarily on firearms pretty much the entire career. And then the last 16 years, I was the firearms training program director for the department. So also the range master and armorer for the department. Yeah. And before I left, about 6 months before I left, I started the transition, along with help of others, of the department to the red dot pistol. Mm-hmm. So now, since then, about a year after I left, the entire department had already transitioned to the red dot pistols, and they've been running it successfully since 2018 or so. And I think it changed many things that we take it for granted now. I mean, I think if you talk to cops, it's no surprise when I talk about target focus, or reflexive shooting. Before the red dots became the thing in law enforcement, I think a lot of people either didn't understand it or resist it. Mm-hmm. But once they put that red dot optic on their pistols and using the red dot, not everybody, but I think most people at least start to understand what a target focused shooting or reflexive shooting is all about. And that is what your body, your mind's going to do under extreme stress anyway. Mm-hmm. So you might as well learn how to do it and do it properly so you can shoot accurately and fast as possible, because, every millisecond counts in a gun battle. I think, you've been in several of those, and, I've taught many students who's been in gun battles. And it's same thing is that they all tell me is that
I don't know about battles, but
yeah, okay, shootings, but you shoot where you look at. It's just the way we're built. You look at it, you stare at it, and you shoot the area that you're looking at, and which is why many officers shoot the suspect's hands, mm-hmm. at least initially. And we've had a few shootings that way, where the suspect's hands were just shot full of bullets because he had gun in his hand, was pointing at or trying to point it at the officer. And the ones who did it weren't necessarily the best shooters either, but they got a little lucky because they reflexively shot where they looked. Mm-hmm. Now, if you understand how to use the red dot or even the iron sights properly, your chance of hitting where you look increases, and the chance of you prevailing is higher than if you don't understand it. And I think
traditionally, right, we always talked about look at the front sight, make sure you clear front sight focus, and guys transition to red dot pistol and going, okay, now we got to be target focused. But sometimes some guys don't realize that you can be target focused also with irons, correct?
That's correct. Before I really started pushing the department to transition to the red dot. Starting about 2002, I made a decision as a lead instructor and program manager to teach everybody how to target focus with the iron sights. And there was some resistance, and I think small percentage resisted it to the point where they didn't really understand it. They didn't want to know, and they kept reverting back to the front sight focus, which I understand. That's what you learned.
Mm-hmm.
But vast majority of the department, they all understood over the years, even before the red dot, that in combat, your chance of winning, prevailing is much higher if you target focus, which is a natural thing that your brain, your eyes are going to try to do anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So you might as well just go with it. Go with what your mind and body and eyes are going to do for you. And so we did that with the iron sight, but it's much harder because you got front and the rear sight you got to deal with the notch. It's very difficult to learn. And it can be only done usually for an average officer about up to about 7, maybe 10 yards, where you're effectively hitting the target area. But those who have not trained at the time in the target focus or bought into it beyond, like, let's say 7 yards, they start to hit everything but the target under stress. So, and you can see that during simulation training. Those who naturally are able to shoot where they look or target focus, and some people naturally can do that, they prevail during whether it's gunfight or simulation training. They're hitting where they look. And that's the whole goal, trying to make it as simple as possible. And when the dot came, it made that process really simple in a way. Now we make it difficult and hard because we try to overthink it.
Yeah.
Meaning they look at the dot and they stare at it, try to put it on the target. And what you should be doing is looking through the dot, using the dot as a reference, and really hard focusing on the area that you want to shoot. And if you practice that way, the dot will appear where you look. So the whole point of this training that we're going to do is pretty simple. Even though the drills may be somewhat complex, the principle is really simple. Train so that when you look through the optic and present the gun and stare at a target area that you want to shoot and make the dot appear. Make the dot appear where you look instead of looking at the dot and dragging it to the area that you want to shoot. So the dot should always follow your eyes. Never the other way. If you're following the dot, you're dot focusing, and which is fine if you have low stress, if you have time, you can make that work. But as soon as things are dynamic, things are happening super fast, you started to go into your midbrain and things become automatic pilot, you're going to be using reflexive ability of your mind and body to fight. And if you haven't trained, it's just not going to be effective. You're not going to hit the area that you're looking at very well. So this training is all about, we start kind of slow, but eventually you're going to be presenting the gun fast. You're going to be transitioning really fast between targets, mimicking a moving target, a moving object. Also, you're going to be doing that through movement, whether it's lateral, forward, or back. And you see how, and you've seen this, when you can tell when you look at a person when they're shooting on the move, because they're bouncing, and the dot on your pistol is going to be bouncing.
Yes.
They tend to, the bounce starts to grow. Towards the end, it gets out of control to the point where the dot is all over the place. And you see the students starting to slow down, trying to control that dot. But what you should be doing is getting aggressive, like a fighting stance, and moving quickly. Sometimes if you move really quickly, you're able to get the dot to settle, especially if you're staring at the targeting area. So your mind has the ability to do that in the first place, but we artificially tend to think too much, use our frontal lobe thinking brain, and overanalyze things, and it just won't succeed. You won't succeed very well. So
But
what you want to do?
what if you don't have a front lobe like me?
Yeah, then that's why you're good. You're always good shooter, Raul, because you're always in the subconscious brain, in the
Well, no,
midbrain.
sometimes I've been told,
Right?
I don't have a brain, so at all.
Yeah. So this, this might be offensive to some people, but simple-minded people tend to shoot really well. I don't know if you noticed that. When you try to explain things really articulate about things, they go, "Well, yeah, I can do that." They just do it.
Yeah.
They
So
try not to think.
what does that say for a 5-time grandmaster?
Yeah. Well, I'm overly analytical. I am. I think about everything. Ponder about everything. So yeah, it was difficult for me. I was not always a good shooter. When I started revolver, I actually did pretty well. But because you're not doing a super, back then in the 80s when I started law enforcement, big old Smith and Wesson model 686, 357. You thought because you had 357, you just can shoot slow or one shot at a time, and the target's subject's going to go down if you were to hit them. And we all know that's not the case. And when we transitioned to semi-auto, I had a hard time over analyzing things. Like second shot is always low left. What the heck is going on? First shot you can usually get it on the center. Second shot, low left drove me nuts, overthinking things. And so over the years, my journey to becoming a 5-time grandmaster in USPSA. Oh, by the way, of course, the first one is hardest because you really don't know what you're doing. But that journey took me to where I am now, understanding what you need to see, how you need to see, and how your brain works, how your eyes work, and how you analyze all of that. And now what I do in order to shoot really well, I clear my mind and let my subconscious take over. So it took me a long time to figure out how to get my mind to just use the subconscious brain. And whether it's in competition or in real life. And I think you can reflect back to many years that you spent in SWAT team. If you try to overanalyze making an entry, you're probably going to make a ton of mistakes.
Yeah.
So what you did probably, right, was you practice, rehearse, what you're going to do. And then before you hit the structure, house or building or whatever, you're just paying attention to what you're seeing. You're not thinking, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You're not constantly thinking like that, right?
Yeah.
You're
correct.
just observing and letting your mind do its thing that you've trained to do. And that's what you want to do with shooting, is you want to practice, experiment, learn, make mistakes, and then get to the point where you're really competent at all aspects, fast shooting, precision shooting, distance shooting, close up, all of that, and understand how you did it, and then just execute by seeing, paying attention. And if you allow your mind to do that, it'll just happen, right? So that's my journey, learning all the skills and then understanding the skills and how I did what I did or do what I do, and then letting my brain just do it. Just clear your mind. Look.
Doesn't sound like you're going to have a lot of just standing and shooting. There's going to be a lot of movement, shooting on the
move. So initially, you're going to be doing some shooting standing. All the basics. Just kind of go over the basics again. Even trigger management. We'll talk about that a little bit. If you're a trigger pinner, those who pin the trigger, let the trigger release the trigger until it clicks. And some people are resistant to changing that behavior. And I don't have any problem with it if you can shoot. if you're having issues, and where the issue is going to come if you pin the trigger all the time is not when you're doing precision shooting necessarily. It's when there's time compression, movement, transitioning between targets. You cannot be holding the trigger when you're trying to move the gun and fire at the same time. It just doesn't work. You need to get that finger moving constantly. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. If you have issues with trigger, and how to make sure that you don't move the gun with your trigger finger, and a lot of people do, right?
Yeah.
And some of the ways that they do it is putting way too much pressure on the trigger and slamming that trigger into the frame. And also, when you do that, you're moving your hand, moving other parts of your hand. That all contributes to moving the gun, usually low left for right-hander, low right for left-hander, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're really focused on just making it simple. Isolate the trigger finger, continuously move it, and don't slam it against the gun. That's really simple. Now, like many people, like JJ Rakaza, world champion, US champion, he's really proponent, like I am, prepping and squeezing, right? Mm-hmm. Prepping the trigger and squeezing. So that concept, you don't really have to do in order to be good in combat, but you have to be good at a couple of things. One, continuously moving the trigger finger to match what you're seeing. If your trigger is held back, you're not ready to fire yet. So you got to continuously move the trigger at different speeds, and also not to overflex the trigger, meaning don't slam it against the frame. Most triggers in law enforcement are between 5 and 7 pounds, I think. Mm-hmm. Some maybe 4.5, right? If you're shooting 1911, 2011, maybe 3.5 with the safety on, maybe that's okay. But regardless, if you have a 5-pound trigger, don't hit it with 10 pounds.
Yeah. That's what most people do.
That's what most people do. They hit it about 10 pounds. So then you got that leftover 5 pounds pressure going into the gun. Now, if you're really good and you can press that trigger straight to the rear, you probably get away with it, right? Because you're not going to move the gun left or right, to the left, low left or whatever. But 99% of the people can't pull that off. There are a few who can, but 99% of the people, if they do that, the gun's going to move left, low left is usually what happens with the right-handers. Mm-hmm. Now, they say, well, I just grip really hard with the left hand. That works okay up until about 12, 13 yards, maybe 15. And then as the distance gets farther and farther, no matter how strong you are, you will shoot it low left or low or left. So isolating the trigger finger, moving it continuously, and not over flexing. Those kind of simple things are what we're going to work on, because we're not, frankly, it's a 9-hour day with about 45 minutes to an hour lunch break. So we're not going to dissect all the basics, right? So we're only going to really focus on that a little bit if I see people just slamming the living daylight out of the trigger, right?
Yeah.
And then you see it on paper. And, at 3 yards, they go, well, I'm only about 1/4 inch off to the low left. Well, what is that going to be at 25? Like 4-6 inches, right?
Yeah.
You can't hit the center mass when you're 6 inches off. Just not going to happen, especially on a moving target. So those are all those things. So name of the game is target focus hard. Shoot reflexively while managing the trigger, managing your body during movement, shooting at multiple targets, changing distances, small target to bigger targets, to close targets, to far targets, wide transitions, to close transitions, all the things that you should be good at if you want to up your chance of winning a gunfight or encounter.
Well, these are all the types of drills that you'll be doing in class?
Yeah, we're going to be doing that in class. We use mostly paper, multiple different kind of paper targets, cardboard targets. In the morning, in the afternoon, we use combination of paper and steel.
Okay.
Steel targets, whether one shot or two shot or three shots, managing triggers while transitioning on the different steel. And the steel is going to kind of tell the story too.
Yeah.
Right. Because you get that immediate feedback and everybody can hear what you're doing. So if you're holding the trigger back and not letting go, it'll manifest itself usually as a pause in shooting. How many times have you seen in a video where there's a pause in a shooting?
Yeah. It's like trigger freeze.
Yeah, trigger freeze, because they're holding the trigger back. You've seen
Yeah.
some of that. It just doesn't happen. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. You're going to continuously fire. So you want to be good at continuously firing and hitting the target. You don't have to have wicked splits from shot to shot, but you should be shooting continuously.
But Yong Lee has wicked splits. But if I wanted,
Well, yeah, we're talking more about that too. The wicked splits are kind of a little trick, if you will. One, you have to have shooting hand really relaxed.
yeah,
Two, if you want to have those sub 14 splits, if you want to have 11, 12, occasionally 10 splits, you're going to have utilize bouncing.
and you have to have a
Using the
last name.
bounce.
You have to have a last name of Lee, right?
You got to be able to bounce that trigger. It's almost like a bonfire. And
Yeah.
we're talking a little bit about that too. Those who are really interested in those crazy splits, I'm sure some of the students will pull it off. I've seen, I've been teaching for many years, over 30 years. And over the years, I've seen some amazing students. And I'm sure we'll see some here in your class that you put together.
We're in Idaho, so yeah.
Yeah, that's really surprised me, right? When because I taught all over the country, instructors, and when I came to Idaho, remember you told me,
Yeah.
he goes, "Yeah, Young, Idaho's not going to be like other places you taught." I go, "What do you mean?" He said, "Idaho boys can shoot." I go, "Yeah, right." I was like, "Yeah, right."
Yep, that's
We're
true.
seeing, and then sure enough, the class that I taught in 2019.
Yeah.
And they're from all over the state, and everybody can shoot.
Yeah.
When I say they can shoot, is they can manage the recoil, they got decent trigger, and their stance, grip, trigger management is all solid. I was really surprised actually.
Yeah.
And since then, and all the Idaho cops that I've seen shooting a gun, coming out of the post academy that you're a big part of, that it's like, man, it's as if, I was there helping out. It's like it's like a dream that you want to see your students do well. And I see that from the students, recruit officers coming out of the academy here in Washington. So you guys are doing outstanding job along with, and you got quite a few USPSA or competition shooters in your team of cadre of instructors here too.
Yeah.
So that really helps, which is kind of rare, actually, pretty rare across the country, because there's some resistance to that, right?
Yeah.
The resistance to shooting a competition, which is kind of silly, because if you want to be really good at fighting, physically fighting, you should be doing jiu-jitsu like BJJ and kickboxing, do all of those, and then incorporate into like law enforcement.
Yeah.
To say that, well, I'm not going to do BJJ or kickboxing or Muay Thai boxing, judo. I'm not going to do those because it's not realistic, not real life. Well, maybe not, but they're pretty close. They're pretty close to real life.
Yep.
And you can incorporate all of that good stuff, right, into the repertoire that you have. Now, shooting is kind of the same thing, whether you shoot IDPA, USPSA, or even Steel Challenge, preferably USPSA, because USPSA rewards fast and accurate shooting.
Yep.
Tactics, Not really, right? We all know that. But other disciplines who try to be tactical, in reality, they're not really tactical.
But honestly,
They
if you look at some of the body cam footage, you know, and talk to guys who've been involved in shootings, speed is a tactic, right?
it is tactic.
And one of the things you notice is a lot of cops can shoot accurately, but the speed part is what is most difficult for them. So that's something that obviously we just have to train to balance out that speed and accuracy. And I think people forget that speed is a tactic because a lot of times you don't have time for cover. Cops are getting ambushed, and you just have to draw your gun and shoot. So
Yeah, shoot, get your gun out while you're moving, and continuously shoot while you're moving until you get the cover. Then maybe you can do some precision shooting. But even precision shooting, unless the target is like 25 yards or beyond, you're still going to be target focusing. There's been a lot of studies, and most of the studies are similar. What the findings, rather, is that up to about 18 yards under extreme stress, you're going to target focus. And after that, you tend to start sight focus or dot focus more. But when this study was done, they didn't do it with the red dot. I think with the red dot, it's going to be way beyond 25 yards where you're going to start dot focusing. And you can probably dot focus beyond that because, if the target is beyond 25, you're not going to be as stressed. Your emotional arousal is not going to be as high. So you're going to be able to manage yourself so you can actually focus more on the dot. But we're going to train so that you never focus on the dot, because you're going to train your eyes and your brain so that even 35 yards, 40 yards, 50 yards, you're going to stare at the target as much as you can, as best you can, and use the red dot or the sight indirectly, looking through it or indirectly. Some people say, well, kind of blurry. But I look at it more as indirect sighting. Target focus, the dot is there. And you go, well, I can't do that. It's because you haven't practiced enough. And how do you practice for that? Without using thousands of rounds of competition, usually is what it takes. You can do that at home dry firing, because with the red dot, dry firing has much more meaning. Because with the iron sights, you really don't know if you're lining up those three, nubs.
Yeah.
Notch. You're getting it down the center of the notch. You don't know if you're lining up very well if you're target focusing. But with the dot, red dot, you're doing it right because you can see it.
Yeah.
What you want to do when you're dry firing is continuously stare at the target, focus on the target so that the dot is there without you transitioning your direct vision to the dot. So also when you're practicing, and you can experiment with this too, I don't know if I told you, is that when you're shooting with target focus and having the dot as an indirect vision, what you'll find is that you really don't feel the gun in your hand hardly ever, because your subconscious mind is kind of taking over. If you focus on the sight or the dot, now you're having what we call an internal, instead of an external experience. Your brain is having an internal experience. When you're having an internal experience, you feel everything. How you're gripping the gun, how the gun is recoiling off your hand, how the gun hurt, your wrist hurts because you're shooting a 10 millimeter or something like that. You feel all of that, right? You feel the tension in your shoulders and all of that. If you're in the subconscious brain, you really don't feel the gun in your hand. Things just happen. And you experience what you see, not what you feel inside your mind, your body. You're seeing what's out there. So you're having an external experience. So when you're in a gun battle, you're going to have an external experience, not an internal. Nobody thinks about when somebody is shooting at you, what you're going to have for dinner.
Yeah.
You're not going to do that. You're going to stare at the muzzle blast coming at you or trying to duck from it, right? So you want to train that way, have an external experience. But sometimes that can be difficult because sometimes what happens is, the dot is glowing red, really hard, and you can't help but to stare at it. But in real life, it won't be an issue. If somebody's trying to kill you, you won't do that. In training, you may have tendency to do that. Then you want to lower the dot, the intensity of the dot, so you don't direct your focus on the dot, right? So there are many things you can do, and we're going to cover all of that during the class. So everybody will improve on speed of the shooting, but also transitioning, speed, and also accuracy. Because if you see really well where you're shooting at, and if you've done your homework with the trigger, everything becomes automatic, right? Everything becomes automatic, and you don't have to think. If you're thinking about triggering when you're in high stress, you're not going to do very well. One, you won't see the bad guy, the target very well when you're thinking internally about how to do something. So you want to get all of that during dry fire, live fire practice, get all that squared away so that all you have to do is stare at the target and monitor the dot indirectly. So that's the name of the game for this class, really. I mean, it's really simple.
Really learning to be target focused.
Yeah, and there's some complex parts of it, but that complex part will be easy once you have the fundamentals down.
I heard somebody give an explanation of target focused is, you're driving down the road, like on the interstate at high speed, and you get a big bug that hits your windshield,
Yeah.
right where you typically look. You just continue to drive. You notice it, but you're kind of looking through it. You're still looking for the dotted line in the road, right? You're looking beyond it. So I was like, oh, that's a pretty good explanation. But
yeah, exactly.
Looking forward to your class. I've been to your class before. Excellent class. So those who haven't been, or those guys, we have quite a few people signed up. Your class was one of the first to fill, if you can believe that. Yong Lee, people hear the name and people want to be in the class and learn. That's May 27th, 28th, or now I forgot, May 28th, 29th.
Yeah,
it's a Wednesday, Thursday,
29.
And that's in Boise, Idaho at the Double Tap Range. And
so pardon me.
Go ahead.
Make sure to bring, what do we say, 800 rounds?
Yep, 800 rounds.
We're going to shoot close to 800 rounds in
Yeah.
8 hours. You're going to be shooting a lot of rounds, a lot of dry fire. Bring, as many magazines as you can, but preferably at least 4, because the downtime to shooting is loading the mags, right? So if you have a bunch of magazines loaded, like if you bring like 6 and load them all, it's just less downtime in shooting. We don't want to just keep going back and forth with 2 magazines. If you bring 2 magazines, man, you're going to be loading.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a lot of mags, bring a pouch with the ammo in there so that you can be on the line just shoving rounds into the magazine, right? And bring water, right? Not going to do like a lot of kneeling and stuff like that, but
it looks like we're running out of time there, Yong.
Okay, great. If you're wearing shorts, make sure to bring some knee pads, right? If you have pants, shouldn't be a problem. Okay, so we'll have a great time.
All right, looking forward to it, Yong, and I appreciate it. And we'll see everybody at the conference.
All right, let's do this.
All right, you hear that?
Got it.
All right, Benny, how you doing today? It's good to have you back on the podcast. We had you on here a few months ago talking about your background. For those of you who don't know Bennie Coolie, Benny's, I think, one of the most sought after carbine rifle instructors in the military nationwide, pretty much. I've heard a lot of guys go, man, I sure like to go to Benny's class, but he's like this ghost legend. I can't get into his classes. It's hard to get in.
I hate the word legend, man. Legend sometimes means you're gone, taking a dirt nap. So wait for that word to later on in life.
But I've been to a lot of different shooting schools, over my 30-year career in law enforcement. I've been retired for 4 years now, but I would say, Benny, you're one of the top instructors I've ever been to. I've learned so many things about shooting, mindset, all kinds of stuff. But here in May of 2025, May 20th, 29th in Boise, Idaho, we're hosting you for the Law Enforcement Firearms Conference, and you will be teaching carbine portion, right? And that
Yeah.
carbine is like what the average patrol guy carries in their cars, typically a 16-inch or shorter barreled rifle with a red dot. So tell us kind of what you expect to teach in this class.
Well, we're going to hit the ground pretty hard. The class can be very, very fast paced. We'll stay there. We'll stay within the techniques and the drills long enough for the individual to pick up on it, to understand it. But we definitely won't stay there long enough to allow them to master it. If we did, then we'd only cover a very short amount of knowledge, right, and techniques.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a little bit more spread out. It's the same format I used down at the Texas Tactical Police Officer SWAT Conference, which I'll be going down to after this one, actually in April, so before this one. So yeah, there's a lot of information we'll cover in one day, and it's to drive home on the techniques that you need to be able to practice to be proficient, right? There's going to be a lot of emphasis on support side shooting with the rifle, because with the rifle, has a lot to do with your survivability is the angles and on how to clear those angles properly and set up. And a lot of people, it kind of seems very elusive. People think that it's a mystical thing that's just really hard to do. And well, it looks like it's hard. It's pretty easy. By the end of the day, somebody who comes into this class, by the end of the day, you will not know if they're a left-handed or right-handed shooter from hard point positions, meaning a static position. So that doesn't mean they won't be pounding like hell on the inside, right?
Yeah.
But with the rifle, not to overexpose yourself on your angles, on your corners. When you're setting up perimeters out on patrol and stuff like that, there's sometimes you can't get in that strong side. You have to be on that support side so you don't overexpose your body.
Yeah. So like a patrol guy who's on a barricade subject, we've been out there for a couple hours, and you find yourself right-handed on a left-handed wall, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
something like what you would use that
And
for.
I think the reason why people haven't done it is, they just think too small. And I always use that example. I was given that by Jim Clark, Senior, who owned Clark Custom Guns back in Louisiana. I was shooting nationals back there one time, and I was getting ready to shoot one of the stages that afternoon. So I was watching it, and we were talking. Very nice Southern gentleman who since passed on, but he looked at me, he said, Benny, he said, do you know what's wrong with people? Man, I had like 100 things flipping through my head, but I was smart enough to be quiet and listen to him. And he laid the wisdom on me is that he looked at me, he said, they think too small, right? I remember when I first was inspired to really look at the support side shooting was when I was teaching at the MSTOA SWAT conference where the INL was hosting it. And we had a bunch of barricades set up and individuals, we were shooting the right side of the barricade. 20 SWAT officers went across shooting right side. Come back, 19 came back shooting right side on the left side of the barricade, fully exposing themselves. And one officer who was in his 50s from a small SWAT team of only 8 people in the SWAT team was shooting support side or left-handed. And I'm like, damn, did he really just do that? And went back their way, right? And he could switch back and forth, no problem. And it's kind of like, that was pretty profound. It really stuck with me. Then I started pursuing it. It's like, we're idiots. It's like, why did we not do this? And again, I say that with a grain of salt, right? Everybody's doing the best they know how. So, when you go through, post and all your patrol rifles and these different things and the training in the firearms section, they only have so much time to be able to teach you, right? Yeah. But after that, they should have the knowledge to be able to teach you where you need to go. And I think that the support side shooting should be a core set of skills with a rifle that you absolutely should have when you go through any type of qualification with the gun itself, because it's just not that difficult to do from a hard point position. Now there's a little bit more finesse to it and everything else and how to apply it when you're working SWAT operations and do dynamic entries and when to apply it and when not to apply it. But we'll work a lot on that. We'll talk about the emotional side of shooting, understand visual patience, which is key for them to be able to understand that and control the platform.
Not to interrupt it too much, but you use that word visual patience. I know that term's been around for a long time in the shooting world, but the first time I ever heard that was from you back in like the 90s,
Yeah.
And it's so funny that a lot of the drills that we're seeing, a lot of these, if you want to call them big name instructors or whatever nowadays, you hear that they're always talking about vision this, vision that, especially with the red dots, right? But I just think it's funny that I heard it from you like in the 90s, and all of a sudden people are talking about it nowadays like it's this new thing that they just invented.
Yeah, and that's cool as long as they're doing it. And you're right, the vision's everything, but the visual patients, a lot of people that don't understand is how to control the emotional side of visual patients, right? The anxiety or sometimes panic we create within ourselves when we don't think we're going fast enough, and that's that being able to control that during a high stress, shooting situation. And the more you get accustomed to it, right? It's just it's something that we all have to deal with, and people once they understand that it happens to everyone and how to control it and how to see things and make it execute properly, it's something you can wrap around and become a lot better shooter. And the different drills will also that we'll go through that the officers will have, we'll record those on their own phones. So I highly encourage officers, when they come to get their cell phones out, and when we do some of the drills, after they get kind of proficient with it, where they can retain the information, then I'll have, their officer will film them with their phone. That way they're keeping the drill. They can kind of see what's going on. And what I found is normally it's, after like a 3-day class or a 4-day class, which I teach a lot with different units, and, the military I've run for a full week, but like I'll be going out to Alameda County in June and doing a 3-day rifle class out there. And normally the video is not to show them what they're doing wrong. It's to show them how good they actually look. Because when they're doing the drills, you cannot see the mistakes that they're making. Now, they may notice it on the inside, right? But on the outside, they look pretty well flawless. So it gives you confidence, right, on
Yeah.
what you're doing and stuff. So we'll hit that really hard. Multiple target engagements. Certain things that I like to do a lot of, like micro adjustments with the rifle, little things that you can finesse the rifle to get on target quicker. When you're bringing it up and maybe the gun's moving a little bit or the target moves on you, and how to be able to quickly drive that gun and get it onto the target and execute those shots. So we'll do that. We'll talk a lot about the equipment, zeroing, what kind of equipment you need to have, not only for just day-to-day patrol operations, but also like if you had to do an active shooter. I listen a little bit like what Tate was talking about. There's times you need to have magnification. I'm big on having a magnifier, at least on a few guns out there. I was down in Brown Rock, Texas, teaching at the SWAT conference down there 3 years ago, and he actually had an active shooter. And prior to that, we was about 3/4 of the way through the day. The individual who left the range, I was telling the officers how important it was to somebody on the team needs to have a couple magnifiers in case you need them. Sure enough, they ended up shooting this guy. But anyway, there's a lot of urban area, and he was out in some brush, and they could see him, but they didn't know where enough it was actually him or something else. And he said, well, the magnifier could have easily identified. And then when they were approaching one of the targets, right, everybody on the team was right-handed. It was a situation for a left-handed shooter, and he immediately ran up and took point, felt comfortable with it. So, it definitely has its applications.
Yeah.
And again, it blows me away that the day that I walked in, that, when they handed you a long gun, they said you will and shall shoot left and right-handed with it for your angles and stuff. So
Yeah.
we'll push that real well, push it hard. We'll solve a lot of problems, or be able to identify and give them a path forward on it. We won't be able to fix them there, right? Because fixing any shooting problem that the student thinks that he's lacking in is just something you have to put reps on. So, but once you have it identified, I'm a firm believer that one of the key ways that you're well on your way to mastering something is when you can self-correct.
Yeah.
So we'll get them where they can kind of self-correct what they're doing, and then they can go out and practice it on their own, become more proficient.
Yeah, I think that's important. Guys need to realize when you go to these schools, you're not there just to get better by end of the day. You're going to you have to take notes and take those things with you so you can know how to self-correct and train yourself as after you leave the class, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm a big believer, like when you're shooting and you're trying to learn something, you need to be comfortable. So I'm a strong proponent of guys don't even need to wear the full kit, not for at least half, 3/4 of the day.
So what
Just
kind
because
of equipment would you like
they
to
need the
say you
rifle, they
bring?
need magazines, they need knee pads, and be comfortable, right? Because if I got all my kit, everything that we're doing, they can do with their kit. And later on, we'll have them put their kit on. But if I'm hauling that around all the time, I'm trying to learn something new and absorb it. I'm thinking about, I'm hot, my kit, it's just extra 30 pounds of light gear you don't need on you at that time, right? Or 40 pounds of
Yeah.
light gear. So, I work with some of the tier one units, like they rarely ever wear their kit and stuff like that, doing
What
certain
about
things and
the
stuff. And then they put on, yeah, they intermingle it, work for a half hour, an hour, and then get rid of it. And then they push hard. So you can focus more on what you're trying to learn for the shooting and everything. Everybody there coming to the class should already know how to wear their kit. So
yeah.
that's not a concern, but I want them to be comfortable. So it's more of a learning environment, and we'll push hard, right? The only time you get a break is when you're reloading. So
Hmm.
usually, we'll have up to 20 officers in the class. 10 will be shooting and 10 will be reloading. And
Okay.
it's a pretty fast pace doing
Yeah.
that all day long. So we'll cover a lot of information. And, people always say, well, what, what are you going to teach? It's like everything that I'm going to teach here is what I would do with any other group, right? Where it's a tier one military unit, the most advanced SWAT team or patrol. A gunfight is a gunfight is a gunfight, right?
Yeah.
You need to know these basic skill sets, and you need to be good at being able to execute them. Um, because it doesn't matter, right? That gunfight right there doesn't matter what country it is or anything else. It's still a gunfight, right? And you need to have that core set so you can pull the right trick at the right time, have confidence in your technique that you can deal with the situation if needed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how sometimes, especially being a police officer in Idaho, we got some smaller agencies compared to like the guys who are working on the west and east coast. A lot of times you think, oh, they get in a shooting, it's more severe or whatever. But like you say, it's
Mm,
gunfight's the same no matter where it's at, right?
damn right. Yep. Somebody walks up and hits me in the mouth in Idaho or California, it's still the damn same, right?
Yep, a fight is a fight,
Yeah,
right?
a fight is a fight, man.
Mhm.
And yeah, you need to have those skill sets to where you feel confident so you're not thinking about, the body's always going to levitate back to what it's comfortable doing. And that's the key, right? That's where we work on the foundation of so it can go back to something that's comfortable doing that can execute underneath stress.
Mhm.
And everything that I'll be teaching has been proven, not necessarily in combat by myself, right, or anything like that, but it's all been proven. There's not a technique that I won't show that people have not come up to me and said, "Yeah, I shot this dude." And I'm talking more military, right? When we're in the war and everything,
Sure.
doing a lot of stuff over there and certain techniques, and it was, come back and say, "Hey, I got in this gunfight, it was effective," and had to engage, and send somebody home. So, um, that's what it's all about,
Mhm.
and it, it it's the same. It doesn't matter. It's not like I would teach a tier one guy a different shooting technique than a regular patrol guy. As
Yeah.
long as the individual is safe with the gun, I can teach them anything, right? Now it's up to that individual what they do with it, right? How hard they're going to work it, because there's going to have to be some due diligence on their end and how far they want to progress with it, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Everybody wants to be a winner. A lot of them just don't want to prepare for it.
Yeah.
And we all know that, the guys who are going to come to this course, these courses, what you're putting on, which, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I think it's a privilege to be able to have your trust, to bring me in to work with these people. Um, but they're your hard chargers, right?
Yep.
Um, I've
Yeah,
done
you're gonna
this
have
a
SWAT
long
guys, you're gonna have
time.
patrol guys. Heck, just a lot of times the regular patrol guy thinks, oh, the SWAT guys, they go to all this dangerous stuff, but it's the regular patrol guy that needs it. They're the ones who
Yeah,
get the majority of the
damn
shootouts,
right.
ambushed.
Yeah, they're the first ones, man. And the thing I point at is you're going to have a certain core group within your department are those individuals, right, who are looking to improve their skill sets and believe in the mission and know and believe it can happen, right? And then you have a lot of people who they'll just go out and call once a year or
yeah,
twice a year, what the bare minimums. And God bless them. I hope they survive the gunfight, but they're not doing themselves much good or their fellow officers by not going out and training as hard as they should. And there's circumstances that come into where sometimes you can't, but for the norm, a lot of times we set the bar a little bit low, and we don't push as hard as what we should.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. Sometimes you teach that lowest common denominator, and we shouldn't be doing
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I gotta have people out there to enforce, thank goodness that the whole society that we deal with is not completely violent, right?
Yeah.
We gotta have people going out there and keeping people in check. But um, yeah, it's anyway, I really like these type of classes that you're doing and this seminar you're putting on and everything, because the people who will come there are coming because they have a reason and they want to be there.
Yeah.
Nobody's, I guarantee you, nobody's gonna get forced to go to that.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Everybody's
sure.
like, hey, I want to go to this. I want to check out the breaching. I want to do what, I've always wanted to learn how to shoot a red dot on a handgun better. And, and it's, all those classes and stuff like that. It's like the one thing I do is like when I go to these conferences and teach them, it's like sometimes I wish I could just go there as a student. It's like, I'm going to go take his class,
Yeah,
right?
I'll bet.
Just sit back and not worry about teaching or doing
Especially when
anything
you go to
else.
big ones like the TTPOA, because they have lots of instructors at that conference.
Yeah, they have a slew. Yep.
That's the best
Well,
conference I'd ever been to, is that
yeah.
TTPOA.
Yeah, they do a great job. Yeah, they bring in about close to 800 SWAT officers into it.
Yeah.
And I think there's around 45 or 50 high-end caliber instructors at the whole gamut, right, of SWAT type operations and stuff. So yeah, it's a treasure chest of knowledge and experience of the
Yeah,
people who
for
get
sure.
to go there.
Well, good, Benny. I'm glad to have you on here. Just give a quick explanation. I hope this conference goes as well as I want, because I'd like to be able to, have this a yearly event. This is our first one, and good thing is we got some high quality instructors for our first event. People like you. We got Tate, we got Yong, Corey. All these guys are very experienced guys and have a lot of knowledge to pass on. So.
Well, I appreciate you giving us the opportunity and look forward to working with the guys. So, any of you out there listening, man, I hope you take advantage of this, and I hope to see you there. And we'll charge hard.
Yeah, guys, if you haven't signed up yet, sign up. Either take a class with Benny or one of the other guys. Benny's been world champion or U.S. national champion many times over. Anything from handgun, three gun, long range shooting, done a little bit of everything. Worked SWAT for the Department of Energy, and he's a well-rounded guy. So he's going to pass on some good knowledge. And if you haven't had a class from him and always wanted to, right now is a chance. So. All right, Benny. Well, I appreciate you, and we'll talk to you later. So,
Okay.
let's see here. Let me figure this thing out here.